I said, the guy that you want kind of run into midfield for you, you could play the ball at his neck and he's going to take it down. You could put on his ear, he's going to take it down, was Tab. I'm not saying that because he's here. He knows. I've told him, I've told people for years.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Inside American Soccer. I'm your host, Tom Bogert, joined as always by my friend and one of the greatest players in U.S. soccer history, veteran of 3 World Cups, Tab Ramos. And today we are lucky to have another U.S. soccer legend, also a veteran of 3 World Cups, NCAA champion, MLS MVP, a Hall of Famer, most of all New Jersey royalty. Tony Meola is in the program here. Tony, Uncle T, what's going on?
What's happening, boys? Good to jump on with you guys.
Great to have you, Tony.
Listen, I'm just happy you're here. I mean, I need to. This is like in the NFL. There's a football. Sean McVay was known for having what they called a get back coach. That's my role here on this entire show. Is just to be the get back coach. Just get out of your way, let you guys cook, let you run up and down the sidelines, but don't make contact with the referee.
Look, I saw you play indoor, man. I don't know why you're not trusting yourself on the field, man. I literally saw him play in like a couple nights we at All-Star games and stuff. They get together and they play. My man is ready to go. It does. If he needs shin guards, they're in the bag. It doesn't matter what the field is. Guards. He's got all kinds of boots to go, and he's got a spin move. Like, you can't get the ball off of him when he does his spin move.
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize about the spin.
Yeah.
I saw him play a little bit at indoor down here in at Capelli, but I didn't realize he had the spin.
Yeah, listen, no shin guards.
I call him Tommy Spins.
These shins are calcified. No. So I put together those games because I love the community and try to put together the media. And Tony was like, "Yeah, no, I'm gonna come. Nah, I don't want to play though. I don't want to play. My back or my hip or my hamstring or my knee. It was every time you asked him, it was a different thing. And while we're playing, you look over to the right, and Tony's just standing near a goal and just hitting side punts. Just 1,000 miles per hour.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Tone, you sure you don't want to play? He goes, nah, man, my hip and my back, I can't even. And then he turned around and just being like ready, full stance, ready to go. So that hurt a little bit, Tom.
There's no running in the side volley game, Tom.
No risk of getting kicked, to be fair.
Hey, listen, the one thing Tony doesn't have a problem with is hitting a ball hard. I remember I was training at Giant Stadium and Tony punting balls into the upper deck after practice just for fun. That's a long way up there.
I was going to say, Tab, then you had to do fitness going all the way up the stadium to retrieve the balls for Tony. That's what friends do.
That's it.
On this show, we're going to hear to talk about Tony, about the U.S. men's national team, about goalkeeping, about everything. Should we be worried at the World Cup about the goalkeeper spot? Let's hear from Tony. You've heard from Tab and I enough on this. You've also heard from Tab and I enough on what we think the starting 11 for the opening World Cup game is right now. We're going to have Tony give his thoughts as well, tell us where we're right, where we're wrong. And, of course, we're going to go inside the locker room. And now we have another person, another person to be talking about these stories and just fact-checking, and maybe we'll get some new insights in those old days with Tony and Tab. But before we get into anything, we'll talk about our shared geographical connection, more so for you guys being from the same town, Kearny, New Jersey, the birthplace of soccer to me. I love St. Louis, all the history everywhere else, but Kearny, New Jersey, man, that is royalty. So, guys, what was it like when you were kids growing up in that area, knowing all the lore and just all the quality and the melting pot of different communities that came together to produce so many great players?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. When I grew up, or when we grew up, we didn't know anything. I just assumed we came from a town that was predominantly Scottish and English, right? Some Irish in there, and 2 Italian families, and eventually a Uruguayan family with the last name of Ramos, right? That's kind of was the demographic of the town. But in our town, everybody played the game. I mean, I would have, if you would have asked me then, I would have said, yeah, everybody's doing this around the country, right? This is what it looks like everywhere. But we quickly come to realize that wasn't what it was like. So I suppose that my parents moving there when I was 4 years old was just kind of pot luck, that I moved into a place that had a soccer community, that had a heritage in the game, that loved the game, that supported the game. It was predominantly Celtic and Ranger fans when we grew up because of how many Scottish people were in town. So I really didn't know anything. I got into other sports because some of my friends were playing and all of that, and I enjoyed it. But as far as soccer was concerned, that was a way of life that again, I thought we were seeing everywhere in the country.
Yeah, and for me to echo some of that, I was very lucky because obviously I moved from Uruguay when I was 11, and I was lucky enough to move into an area where soccer was important. And again, I remember telling my dad when we moved into the country, I remember telling him, why out of all the countries in the world did we have to move to the one that doesn't have soccer? But yet I landed in an area that did have it. So I was really lucky. I think we were all lucky to grow up in an area and at a time where, don't forget, we had the Cosmos right down the street too. So we had a professional team. Our town was, had a long history of 100 years of soccer already. And it was very lucky that we grew up in an area where we thought we were doing things that other kids around the country were doing, only to find out that they absolutely were not.
So, a lot of it was more based on, I use the term street soccer as just a very vague and basic term. Less so, again, at that time, not just here, but everywhere, the ideas of academies and clubs and everything else, it was less time restrictive in a way, and a lot more of you guys just going down to a local court and winner stays on. And at that time, again, I've heard all the stories, I've seen a documentary. So just tell us a little bit about what it was like in those days to just be like, all right, I'm out of school, I'm gonna go play at the courts for 7 hours, and I hope that I'm on the whole time.
Yeah, there was no asking your parents' permission because they were probably working until 5 o'clock at night. Both my parents worked my entire life. They knew where you were going to be, right? They knew you were going to be down the courts or down the Gunnell Oval playing soccer. You either hit a training or you were playing. I remember going every single morning to school, and we had our school was on a public street, and we just prayed that the cars parked across the street from each other, because what we would do was we'd take a tennis ball and we played 2v2, and underneath the car in between the wheels was the goal. And we were just hoping that the goals lined up when the cars parked across the street. But that's all we did, Tom. We just played every single day. There was nothing organized going. I know you've heard about the courts, and Tab will tell you about it as well. There was nothing organized. You just knew that if the organization was, there were a couple guys in town that wanted certain guys to be on. No, seriously, that wanted certain guys to be on their team, and they'd call you on your rotary phone and go, "Hey man, wear a black shirt today." We call but that's as organized as it was. There was and it was winter stay on. It didn't matter if you were 10 years old or 50 years old, and they didn't care. They kicked the crap out of you if they had to, But again, it's one of those things. It doesn't matter where you grow up or how you grow up. You just, that's what it was there. We didn't know any different. I didn't know what was happening in the next town over because we didn't really travel. We traveled on the weekends once. We didn't have 3 games a weekend for the most part. Maybe 1 tournament a year. But yeah, I mean, I still think we were, at least in my case, I was just lucky to be in Kearny because we moved from about 3 towns over. And my parents just picked Kearny.
Yeah, and I think, you think about it when you're a kid, and Tony just mentioned about it didn't matter what age you were, right? You could be 10, 12, 14, but there was the most important motivator in the courts was that winners stayed on. And so if you were young or you were younger, if you weren't getting picked for a team, it wasn't because you were younger, because everyone wanted to have the players on their team so that they could win the game and stay on. Because sometimes there'd be 2 or 3 teams waiting to play. So if you lost the game, now you had to wait, a half hour, 40 minutes to play the next game. And so you wanted to stay on. So if you were young and you did well at the court, everybody would want to pick you and you'd play it all day. But for the guys that didn't do well, it was rough because they played 10 minutes and they'd be out.
I gotta ask one quick follow up, and feel free to no comment if you don't want to sully either of your names. But I gotta imagine that there was some fisticuffs along the way, and more than once. Is there any quick story that comes to mind for either one of you guys for having to stand your ground, or should we just move on?
I'm sure there were fights along the way, but we lived in a day where, I mean, it was part of it. Like what kid didn't fight in the streets, right? Like if you were playing basketball somewhere, you were fighting, you were arguing, and you were cursing each other out, and it was all part of winning. Like that was the best thing about it. And I don't remember anything in particular, but I guarantee you, I mother effed somebody along the way, like because I just wanted to win. That was just me as a kid, you know.
Yeah, it was all about winning, and little guys like me would get jacked up throughout the game, so that was not fun because landing on the concrete is not as easy as landing on grass, so that was not fun. But always part of the game. I think for the most part, the games were hard, but they had good competitive spirit, and I think a great environment to grow. Really, for us. I'm a couple of years older than Tony. You always, not only did we go to the courts and hear about the older guys who were there, who maybe came back from college, and you knew their names because they were great. They were playing at, where Philadelphia Textile back then, or UNLV. Like we had guys from Kearny there, but we also heard of the young guys like Tony and Sal and the guys that were coming along after us. So you always kept sort of, ears open about who was coming next because you'd want to have the good guys always on your team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And speaking of the place that means so much to both you guys and so much to U.S. soccer and the men's national team in particular, Kearny. And I want you guys to tell me about the legacy project that you're working on to help grow the game, again, in a place that is so special to you, to me, to all of the soccer community in this country.
Yeah, it is special to us. There's no doubt about that. Tab, myself, and initially John Harks, we got into sort of about 2.5 years ago. We started exploring like what can we do with the town? Like how can we kind of bring? You mentioned the documentary. How can we bring the documentary full loop, right, in full circle, and put a bow on this thing? Because I felt like it just kind of ended. And of course it picks up every now and then because someone wants to do a story on it. But it didn't have nearly as much momentum. So I don't know, Tab, right? For about a year, maybe a little bit less, we threw around all kinds of ideas, Tom. Camps and scholarship programs. And I mean, you name it, whether it was good or bad, like you throw enough ish against the wall and you're hoping that something sticks, and then we kind of got away from it we said, let's get away for a month and like come back with something that might stick. And I guess, Tab, it started, you and I had an idea, and you and I were sitting in our friend Charlie Stilitano, another great New Jersey soccer name. We were sitting in his backyard having, he had a get together. And I mentioned to Tab, I'm like, Tab, I was thinking like the one thing this town's never had with all the soccer history was professional soccer. I'm like, let's try and bring a team to Kearny. And when I said it, I'm like, I see Tab looking at me over here. He thinks I'm crazy, man. And then it kind of, right, Tab, it kind of stuck a little bit from there, and we went back and thought about it, and we've kind of progressed it a little bit.
Yeah, we started talking. We started to visit the city a little bit. We started looking at some options. And then came the time to meet with the mayor. The mayor had been a fan for a while. Obviously, we wanted to make sure, I have to say, we have to give Tom McGabe a little bit of credit because I think he's the one that put together the documentary. And by doing that, I think it brought back a lot of memories. But not only that, it I think, reemphasized for us how important Kearny has been to soccer in general. Because it's not just the fact that we've had multiple World Cup players over the years. It was also the fact that, Kearny had been involved from the beginning, that the first games in the country were played in our area, that Kearny had games going all the way back to 1883, and that soccer continued to be so important in the town for 100 years that even when groups like Sam's Army got started, I think that was all around the time where World Cup 94 came along and all the Kearny guys went over. And Tony, you could probably talk much better about this. All the Kearny guys, went over to California and kind of took over. And they were, I think to me, they were the first real fans that started following almost like hooligans that started to follow the team. And so I think Kearny has had a big impact in the sport, not just on the field, but off the field. And for us to be able to to bring back a professional team, or to bring in a professional team to Kearny after 100 years, a town that has never had it, where soccer is still the most important sport today. I think it's a little bit of a legacy project. It's something that we can leave behind for all the generations to come.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a dare I say, a Wrexham feel to it, right? Not the same professional history, but sort of the community in the town. So what we're trying to, ideally, we know if we build this thing, Tom, that we'll get people from around the state. We'll get people who are traveling in that will want to see it. But ideally, our dream is that on a Friday or Saturday night, there's 5,000 or 6,000 Kearny people in the stands, right? Like 5,000 or 6,000 that are going to games. Like that would be ideal scenario. So we're in the land purchase / investor phase right now. We've done a lot of work for 2.5 years. We're far along the line. We've been in town hall meetings, and the reception has been great so far. So we want to get this thing over the line in the next couple of years, and it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of investment. The good thing is that it's not just a soccer project, because we know sometimes in the soccer world it's a difficult place to make money, let's say. So there's a real estate component that's attached to it, and it's just been, for me, I don't know about Tab, it's been a learning project. We got a great team of guys from the business world, from the banking world, from the investment world, and man, I'm learning a lot and loving every minute of it.
Yeah, no doubt.
And
it's been great having the guys we have on. We brought in some personal friends who have been really key, who know all the things that I think Tony and I couldn't possibly know about, that know all of those things that when you look back and you see the advice that these guys give us, it's really invaluable. So we've tried to bring in as much value as we can, knowing what we know. And by the way, I think, and this is the great thing about, soccer, and it's not just playing. And, sometimes when you have a long career, you develop a lot of friendships, and more than anything, I think you develop some trust. But it's been now that, Tony and I are on the phone every day, and having someone who's been there with you in tough moments, makes it so much easier to do a project like this with.
And listen, for anybody to bring this to life, being you guys, I know you said John Harkes was involved as well. Like, it's how it has to be, and it's always cool to see these things continue through the generations. And like you said, legacy project and growing the game. This isn't about finances or big time glory or anything. It's things that you guys care about, and that's always, I think, the best starting place on a lot of these things. But to go to a starting place towards the World Cup, let's catch up really quickly on a couple of the notable performances for our current U.S. men's national team and guys who impressed over the weekend or the last week or so. So let's start with Brenden Aaronson. He's been in a great run of form for Leeds. He scored again this weekend in a draw with Manchester United. Tony, I'll start with you. At this point, is Brenden Aaronson a lock to make the World Cup roster?
Yeah, I know that's the question. I with all of these things, Tom, as you know, you and I have worked together. I try not to have sort of recency bias, right? Like, I try not to go week to week with all of these things. I've seen Brenden Aaronson, for me, as an impact substitute with the national team. A guy that comes on. Could he potentially start a game in the World Cup? Yeah, I could see a scenario where he starts a third game in the World Cup, right? If you're in a position to do that, and hopefully we are, but it won't be easy. But he for me, we've done, everyone's done their predictions, right? I'm sure you've done your full roster, and for me, over the last, let's call it 6 months or so, he was in that, they're going to have 26 guys. He was in that 22 to 26, 27, like just on the fringe, right? For me, he's kind of moved into like 20 to 24, 18 to 22, like in that range for me, because of his play. With attacking players, I mean, what are we looking for? We're looking for guys who make an impact in the attacking part of the field. And for a while, he wasn't making an impact. Having said that, he played, I think, last year at his club, he played 41 games, which is a lot, and the number 10 position for a team who scored the most goals in the championship but didn't have a ton of goals or assists. But they trusted him, right? And now he's starting to pay back the trust that Daniel Farkas had in him. So I'm happy for him because he's a good kid. He's got World Cup experience, and if you're asking me today, is he a lock for the World Cup today? The answer would be yes.
That's where I sit as well. And you talk about recency bias. I completely agree. I think, Tab, we talked about this in very recent episodes as well. I just think what he brings you from the baseline, the floor, the energy, the things that you can rely on. And again, whether it's a 10, he might not be the guy that could get to a 10 out of 10, like a pure number 10 match winner guy. But I know if you put him on the field, the baseline of what you're getting. So I think that makes for a reliable squad player, right, Top?
Yeah, I think it depends. And I agree with Tony that, at this stage, how can you not have him on the roster with the type of season that he's having? And, Tony said something really important, and that's trust. And when you have a manager in the EPL trust you week to week, I mean, if that doesn't say everything you need to hear, especially for us and for our country, and the fact that it's not like we have 20 players playing in the EPL, we have a few, and he's doing well. So I would agree with that, and I think Aronson becomes, not a starter, but someone that will depend on the dynamics of a particular game. I don't think he's a half-field player. So if you're dominating the game, you certainly have other guys that can break the game down a little bit better than he can. But you know what? If you're taking a little bit of pressure and you need a couple of attacking players who could potentially need to make those 30, 40, 50-yard runs to get into the opposing box to make something happen, he's a guy that you could probably count on. And there's not many of those.
And isn't the goal that he scored on the weekend, that's what you bring him in for, right? Not necessarily the goal, but the anticipation, right? He's going to be the first to run in behind somebody and use his energy. And he stole another ball in the end line where he turned the corner and almost connected the pass. Like, it was just opportunistic. The ball separated from the defender. He goes. Like, that's what you bring him in for. I'm with you. Like, if you're controlling the game and you need someone to break a pass down, I think Gio Reyna is probably the guy that plays in that spot, right? Like, he's the guy that could pick out a pass for you. Or Brendan Aronson is his energy, and that's what. And then there's got to be some result at the end, because if you just have energy and then you don't have any goals or an assist after 12 games, it's like, well, you got energy. Yeah. Now maybe we bring someone with less energy but has 4 goals and 2 assists. You know what I mean? So, but now it's starting to pay off for him. I'm happy for him, man, because I was 6 months ago, if you would have asked me the same question, the answer would have been, for me, no, he's not a lock on the national team.
And it's funny too, like his brother Paxton, who's now with the Colorado Rapids, but he was a finalist for Young Player of the Year in the Eredivisie. And some people are asking a question of like, oh, like what about Paxton? And again, I think that they are both very different players. They're complementary to one another. It's not one or the other. I think that both has a long-term future with this program. But like you said, if you go back 6 months ago, not only would this maybe have been a different answer, we might have been talking about a different Aronson. Sticking in the midfield though, Weston McKennie scored for Juventus in their draw against Lecce. He's played all over. We've had that conversation over and over again. My friend Doug McIntyre from Fox Sports, who I'm going to say on the front end, I respect the hell out of Doug. He's very, very smart. He's an excellent journalist, excellent writer. So I'm setting up to say Doug said that Weston McKennie is the best midfielder in USMNT history. I love Doug. That is a ludicrous thing to say for me. But Tony, what say you? Is Weston is that a fair argument to even have? Because I don't even think it's a conversation at the moment.
I did this on our CBS show a little bit earlier. We went through this again, and I love Doug too. And I said, I was joking. I'm like, Doug must have been bored that night, man. He's just looking for some clicks, or something. But I love him to death. But I get where he's coming from. If you want to just look at numbers and say, okay, 62 games with a national team, 11 goals, 200 appearances with Juventus. I have everything in front of me. But we started to rank like some of the midfielders, right? And not rank them, but put names out there that could maybe make an argument. And you can go anywhere from Claudio to Michael Bradley to I'll get the Tab in a minute, but Jermaine Jones, John O'Brien, Tyler, I still think is still on that same. John Harkes, Thomas Dooley, who's one of the more underrated central midfielders we've ever had. We had a bunch of categories. The GOAT, the Mount Rushmore, and then I think everyone there were 5 categories, and I forget what the third one was. Everyone else kind of landed on the third category. It was me, Charlie Davies, and Jimmy Conrad, and we picked just, if you're going to take. I said, look, if you're going to ask me who a guy that is smooth on the ball, a guy that makes it look effortless. I probably would, if that was the criteria, and that's why I wish Doug would have defined the criteria a little bit more. I would have picked Claudio Reyna, right? If you asked me a guy to go box to box and break plays up and be on the, and when I say box to box, I literally, because I don't think there's a lot of box to box midfielders in the world anymore, but go 6-yard box to 6-yard box and do all the dirty work and cover ground, it would have been Thomas Dooley. A guy, if you ask me, was one of the best guys of breaking up plays in world football, and Tab coached him, Jermaine Jones. Like there's different categories of all of these guys. Michael Bradley, like a cerebral player. He would have been one. He would have been that guy in covering ground. John Harkes, if you asked me, like someone who had like the total package and the biggest heart in the world, he would have been that guy, right? Could do everything. Could pass, could tackle, could run, could shoot from distance. And I said the other guy who ended up, for all three of us, being the GOAT, I said the guy that you want kind of run in the midfield for you, you could play the ball at his neck and he's going to take it down. You could put on his ear, he's going to take it down. Was Tab. I'm not saying that because he's here. He knows. I've told him. I've told people for years. So I wish Doug would have qualified like he's having the best midfield career, with a club team. And it's the other. My last point on this is people sometimes forget. I think they sometimes forget that back in the day when we were kind of coming up and Tab was one of the guys that went to Europe, to make a European roster, you had to be one of three guys, right? In Serie A, like I look at Serie A now, I look at like my club, Milan or Inter, there's hardly an Italian on the field, right? Back then, you had 8 Italians and 3 foreign. That was it. You couldn't even have them on your roster. Like they couldn't even be. There became a period where you could have extra foreigners on your roster, but only 3 on the field. And when you think about it in those terms, and think about some of the guys that played in the past that would have had more opportunities to do this, I think they get sold a little bit short now because of what the game is like today. But is Weston, can Weston have his moment to get on the Mount Rushmore? Yeah, and I joked again today. I hope that moment comes in like somewhere at the end of June this year, like beginning of July. Like I hope he has his signature moment, like that we remember forever. Great player, but I don't know that I would put him as the best one.
Tab, would you agree that Tab Ramos is the best player in all time there?
It's hard for me to argue that. No, I don't want to go too long in this answer because I would repeat a lot of what Tony said. I also created different categories, and I'd go back to even guys like Rick Davis, in the late 80s who were, Mike Fox. Like we've had some great midfielders that aren't even mentioned who would potentially, now be incredible players, right? So I don't think I would focus because Tony has said pretty much everything that I would say. If you're defining a midfielder, someone who can get into the box, well, Landon Donovan came off as a midfielder, coming from behind at times. Clint Mathis could do it. And I think in terms of quality, there's a lot more quality there. But now let's not forget, right, why we're having this conversation in the first place. We're having the conversation because Weston McKennie is a great player, right? And he has a lot of qualities where he is as good or better than anyone who's ever played the game before. Right now, when you start trying to decide who the best is, I think it's going to be defined a lot by, I think it's generational, right? It's who you've seen, and then you put it all together and you say, "Oh, I like that guy." But I think Tony's absolutely right in dividing this into different types of positions. You have your holding box to box, you have your distributor type like the Claudio Reynas, and then you have your just flat out attackers who are creating plays. And obviously, McKennie is not that.
Right, and for me, like I try to be pretty sacred when things are the discussion of like best ever, things like that. Like, yes, the club career, it is a different time than it was previously, like you said, but still playing at Juventus, that's huge. But I can't really get into the best category while he's in his mid-20s. Again, he's got a whole lot of career in front of him and hopefully a whole lot of big moments. And maybe in 10 years we'll be talking about this again with less hypotheticals and more talking points to argue with and point to and say this is what he did at the 26 World Cup, and this is what he did at the 2030 World Cup. But for me, it's just sacred ground when you're talking about the Tab Ramos and John Harkes and Michael Bradley and Jermaine Jones. Like with all due respect to Weston McKennie, he was a wonderful, wonderful player. I think we revisit this conversation in 8 or 10 years to properly do it. And we'll probably be arguing about the next, 23, 24-year-old that's coming through the U.S. national team.
Hopefully.
But we've gone long.
Hopefully we will be.
Hopefully. Really quickly, we have to take a break. We'll be right back with, we'll talk some little goalkeepers with Tony, our current starting 11s. We'll go into inside the locker room for a story. We got a lot of show left here. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Inside American Soccer with Tom Bogert and Tab Ramos, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, welcome back to Inside American Soccer. And since we have Tony Meola here, just a legendary goalkeeper, we got to ask him about the goalies. We talk about everything else. He knows everything else too, but it'd feel weird to not talk to Tony Meola about the state of goalkeeping for the United States. So, Tony, Matt Freese has been the preferred starter under Mauricio Pochettino. He took the job from Matt Turner. There's been Patrick Schulte, Zach Steffen, Ethan Horvath a little bit, probably a couple other guys. It's been pretty wide open until Matt Freese took it, or it is wide open, I think, behind Freese. So from where you sit and when you're analyzing this group, one, is Matt Freese your preferred number one choice for this team going towards the World Cup? And two, if he is, what makes him that guy? What makes him the number one for the U.S.?
Well, yeah, I think right now he's Mauricio Pochettino's guy for sure, right? I think he's proven that. There were opportunities even when Matt was coming sort of through this summer in 2025. Pochettino had opportunities to play Matt Turner, right? And he didn't. And Matt Turner was in a pretty bad situation in Europe. He's in a couple really bad situations in Europe, right? As a matter of fact, leading into the 2022 World Cup, he had only played 7 matches with Arsenal in that spring. Predominantly, I think they were all cup games, if I'm not mistaken. And I was surprised at how well Matt Turner did at the World Cup because it's a rhythm position, right? It's a position, but you're a little bit younger. You're fighting every day in training. Eventually, it caught up with Matt Turner that there wasn't a great rhythm in his game anymore, right? So Matt Freese had been the guy. And I think he's going to be the guy at the World Cup. What I suppose what the biggest surprise is, I felt like for years we always had 3, 4, or 5 guys. If you go back to all of the cycles, that there were 2 or 3 guys fighting for a starting job, and then there were 2 or 3 guys behind them fighting to make the World Cup team. I feel like now we're just kind of looking to see who the third guy is going to be right now. Like, and I don't know that we've ever been in this position before. I'm a little bit surprised that we're in this position because it's always been a fairly strong position for us. A lot of it has to do with the number of, or the lack of, I guess I'm right, the number of foreign goalkeepers that have come in the league, right, that have taken spots from other people, which is normal, which you have to compete with. But there's been sort of like a perfect storm to get us to this point. I'd like to think that Matt Turner's going to come back in the spring and have a say in the end, at least push Matt Freese. I do think Matt Freese is going to be the goalkeeper at the World Cup as of right now, of course, just, without injury. And then who's number 3? The only one that really has a rhythm right now is Jonathan Klinsmann. Right, he's the only one that has a rhythm. He's playing in Serie B every weekend. He's winning Player of the Week, all kinds of stuff. After that, Chris Brady's not playing. Zach Steffen's not playing. Cochin, I know, just had a nice weekend this weekend. And then we got to wait to see what happens with Patrick Schulte or Celentano, which I don't think are in that picture right now. So that, for me, is like the big goalkeeping picture. The biggest surprise for me is that Gaga Slonina is out of the picture. When he hurt that hand or the finger last year, he was having a tough time in Europe, but he hurt the finger, and it took him a while to come back until the summer. And then he gets stuck being the 3rd goalkeeper at Chelsea. This weekend, I think Robert Sanchez was injured, right? So he was on the bench this weekend. But I'm surprised that he's not part of this picture right now. But injuries and a little bit of lack of form kind of killed him.
Yeah. Hey, Tony. So here's something that I think would be important, at least for people like myself and likely a lot of the people listening who don't know a lot about goalkeeping, right? Because even when you're the head coach, and in my case, I was a head coach at MLS, and still, when we gave up a goal, I had to ask the goalkeeper coach if that was a good one or a bad one, right? Did he do the right thing or did he not? No, when you look at our national team, and obviously it looks like Mauricio Pochettino has now switched to that, possibly the 3 in the back, right? And having potentially 3 center backs. But it's been sort of a, revolving door of center backs playing back there, because, and eventually we could potentially end up with, Mark McKenzie playing on that left side of the 3. We could end up with Ream playing. So Ream's a lefty, McKenzie's a righty. So like there could be a number of different situations and combinations of center backs playing in front of the goalkeeper. How much does that affect the goalkeeper? And are these conversations that normally as a goalkeeper you would feel comfortable with going to the coach and saying, hey, I feel much more comfortable with so-and-so?
Well, I think it affects the center backs more than it affects the goalkeeper, right? Because if you think about it, let's just assume we're playing with 3 in the back. And I loved playing that way because I just think it's easier to organize. We won a championship in Kansas City. We were really good for a couple of years like that. You're still given the same instruction. So when you look out on the field, the ball is somewhere and you're organizing, right? It doesn't matter if I'm organizing you or Tom or the next guy, right? Where the defender, what you want to see as a goalkeeper is that I tell you, Tab, go right. Well, you don't really look at me. You trust me, and you go right because I told you to go there, and that happens over a period of time. And that's where I lasted the longest in my career because I think I was an extension of the coach in a lot of ways, where I could get the feedback and say, okay, this is where the coach wants people. And then after a while, when you're 35, 36 years old, people are listening, right? They tell you to go right, you go right. You go left, you tell to go. Yeah, that's how it works. But I think from a center back's position, like you're hearing a different voice, right, all the time. You're hearing somebody different. And then you're standing next to somebody in a different spot on the field. And I think that's where it hurts a little bit, more than it hurts the goalkeeper. I think it hurts the center backs a little bit more. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I always looked at it. Because I'm gonna work. The coach tells me play 3 in the back or 4 in the back, whatever it is. Put the guys here. It doesn't matter to me who you are. I'm putting you there, right? The coach told me I got to put you over there. I got to put you there. But Tom, I got to tell you, because Tab kind of touched on it. I coached with Tab. The luck of coaching with Tab and Tab being around some of the teams that I was an assistant coach for in the national team. I was there for 5 years with Tab. Mm-hmm. If I ever coached with anyone that, I don't know if he did. I think he knows more about goalkeeping than he leads on, but doesn't care about goalkeeping. I don't think I'll ever.
Very true.
Because we would go to the meetings and he'd go to goalkeepers like, he's the head coach, and you're always waiting for the head coach to go, hey, okay, I think like dead silence. Like, don't you want any say in this at all? No, he don't want any say to, like. Yeah, you could look and you're like, man, he really doesn't care. Like, we could play whoever we want.
It's good leadership. That's delegating.
Yeah. That's right.
Everything else was
Matt,
fine. I'm the goalkeepers.
I was a manager, not a coach.
There's the difference, Tom. Now you can figure it out, right?
People are starting to.
Is this what it's
people
like?
Are starting to come around to that now. See that?
This is what it's like when you guys are bringing,
you were way ahead
the
of
team
it,
to Kearny.
Right, I was ahead of the game.
Kind of one more on this front. Again, everything is geared towards this summer and 2026 World Cup. It's hosted here, and you guys obviously have the experience of playing in a home World Cup. And Tony, we're talking about goalkeepers. Why is this going to be a different level of pressure than, say, even Matt Turner in Qatar at the World Cup? Like, what are the differences to doing this at a home World Cup?
I mean, we didn't really know what it was going to feel like, but it is completely different. And I think from a goalkeeping standpoint, I would say this from a center forward standpoint too, because I look at them the same way. Sometimes you get one chance, and you got to be able to play. Like when I look at just the World Cup at home, people are always like, "What was your best game?" And there's like I could look at like England and some other games where I played really well. I still think my best game was the game I gave up the poorest goal in the World Cup, where I cheated and I got beat at the near post. But then I was able to react, because when you think about it, we were at home. It was a big goal we gave up. We were under a little bit of pressure at that time, but I played really well the rest of the game and kind of kept us in it for a little while. And that's what you have to deal with, right? You got to deal with. Look, when everybody's great. Tab will tell you he coached a lot longer than everybody's great when things are going well. Like when the team's clicking and you're scoring goals and you're attacking, like everybody's a really good player. Like at the World Cup, especially at home, how do you react when things don't go your way? And that, I think, is the thing. You don't have to deal with that when you're playing in Germany. Like if you're the U.S. playing in Germany, you don't have to deal with that pressure. You're home now. And it will be a pro-U.S. crowd. It was in '94, and it will be here. And how do you deal with all of that pressure? Does Europe prepare you for a lot of that? Yeah, sure it does. But it's the World Cup, and you're going to feel a little bit different.
And that game you're referencing, that was versus Romania, the third group stage game, right?
Yeah.
How difficult was that, I guess, on the mental side of things? When, like you said, you played really, really well, but then you're sitting here 30 years later saying, I just should have done better. The goal was my fault.
Oh, no, the goal was my fault. No question about it. I can remember saying to myself, holy shit, man, it can't get any worse than this. Like, that's it. I gave up a near post goal where I cheated. And for 5 years before that, I cheated, and the ball ended up in my hands because the guy's trying to cross the ball across the 6-yard box. But Petrescu, the right back, he may have seen all of that, right? Maybe we did have videotape back in the day. It might have still been black and white, but he'd seen it, and that's how I got beat. So you got to live with it, and you got to deal with it. One thing I learned: Tap wasn't around Bora as much as I was, but I think was around him enough to learn one thing. He would constantly say, almost to the point where you're like, you wanted to shake Bora, like, stop saying it, but he would constantly say, "What, my friends, what is the most important play? The next one," and it rung in my head, like, okay, I can't do anything. And I think it's such a great lesson for kids. I mean, I used it when I was coaching. I'm like, okay, yeah, you made a mistake, so let's talk about the next one. Like, what do you do? It's so important, man. And it's a trite saying, right? And you want, it's like a parenting saying that you never want to hear on the field, but it's so true, and how you react.
Oh, man, that's some good stuff. We got to take a really quick break here. We'll be right back. We're going to go through our starting 11s for the opening group stage game, particularly with Tyler Adams being injured. We're going to add the wrinkle of that. What if Tyler Adams isn't available or something happens? What will our starting 11s look like? We're going to be right back with Inside American Soccer. Welcome back to Inside American Soccer. We do this on most shows. We like to see how things change over time and our views for the current starting 11 for the United States if the World Cup were to start tomorrow. And right now, we're going to do it with Tony Meola, and we're going to do it with no Tyler Adams. Again, he's got a torn MCL. He'll be out for a couple months with Bournemouth. We're all very, very much hoping that he's going to be there for the first World Cup game. We very much state the obvious of, if he's available, he's just about the first name on the team sheet. If not, maybe the second. So want that out of the way. But hypothetically, if there were more time missed by Tyler Adams, or if we get to any of these games that he's not able to play, what would a starting 11 look like without him? So, Tab, I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go in a 3-5-2, only because I think from now on I'm going to focus on trying to get Pulisic, who's our best player, into the best position possible. This is how he's been functioning and doing well as a second forward, and I think we need to utilize that more than anything. So I'm going to go with Freese in goal, Alex Freeman, Chris Richards, and Mark McKenzie in the back. I'm going to go with Dest and Robinson as the wing backs. In the middle, I'm going to have the three players of McKinney, Tessman, and Tillman. And up front, I'll go with Pulisic and Flo Balogun.
I like that in that it's probably not too dissimilar in the way that personnel would line up as the 3-4-2-1, because Tillman is capable of dropping deeper, and this frees up Weston McKennie to have more freedom to go forward. I find that one interesting. Tony, anything on your end, or what's your 11?
Yeah, so I stuck with Mauricio Pochettino's 3-4-2-1, if you will, right? Matt Freese is in goal. So I went Chris Richards in the center of the field, Tim Ream on his left-hand side, and I've been watching this Noah Kai Banks. I think he's going to be the surprise at the World Cup for us as the right center back. But if it's not him, then do we see Mark McKenzie, who's been a little bit in and out with Mauricio Pochettino, right? The performances have been a little up and down, and I'm not sure that he trusts them completely yet, but that would be my back four. So Richards, Banks on the right, Ream on the left. I think Tab and I have the same thing in the midfield. Robinson on the left-hand side. I have two in the center of the park. without Tyler Adams are Weston and Tanner Tessman. And then I have Serginho Dest on the right-hand side. And it's just a twist in formation. Tillman and Pulisic underneath Balogun up top. So I think we have the same ideas in the attacking part of the field, and maybe just it looks like two center backs, right, are a little bit different.
Right, and I'll just follow up on that quickly with mine because it is very similar. So 3-4-2-1 as well. Tone, Freese in goal. I have got Miles Robinson at right center back, Chris Richards in the middle, and Mark McKenzie on the left. I go back and forth between him and Ream. I'm not sure what it's going to look like in a few months. I want to see how Tim Ream starts in MLS for Charlotte and what he looks like in March in the friendlies. But McKenzie, I think all three of us are big fans of his. And I think with Miles Robinson, just the athleticism is going to be so very important, and the way that he can put out fires. And again, obviously Chris Richards is very, very athletic as well, but just that'll help a lot in covering for, say, Dest at right wing back, which I have him there. Tessman and McKinney in the middle. Anthony Robinson on the left, though, I can see, depending on opponents and situations, whether or not Max Arfson might be there. But Anthony Robinson has looked very good since he got back for Fulham, which is great news. And then Pulisic and Tillman underneath Balogun. And again, I think that we're all saying very similar things, particularly from the midfield forward of, again, whether you line up as a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-5-2, Pulisic is going to basically be a 10-ish, a second forward-ish. He's going to have freedom to find the game, and Tillman would be the one to drop deeper when McKennie makes those runs forward. So I do think that this is, again, it's pretty fluid, and Mauricio Pochettino as well would talk about how important it is for the players and the competitiveness and their ability to adapt to situations. I think that he wouldn't be so defined with the roles and the formations either. One really quickly I wanted to add, Noah Kai Banks. Tony, he has been very good, continuing to play. He was called in, I believe it was September, and Pochettino I thought he gave a very interesting answer when he was asked about Noah Kai Banks, and it was something along the lines of, we think he's a very talented player. Maybe he's not ready for this level yet, but we want him in camp because we want to see what he's like as a person, what he's like in training, what he's like with the group, because young players and a player with his talent, very, very quickly, they can jump from maybe not ready to, oh my God, they need to be part of it. So Pochettino said, like, we cared more about the off-the-field stuff or the training stuff because I want to know more about him as a person so that when he's showing the level that he's ready to be in this team, that I know about him off the field. And it's not a risk or it's not an unknown when we bring him in the group. And I think we're kind of seeing that happen now.
Yeah, and keep in mind, in that camp, he had only had 26 or 36 professional minutes at that point. He had one 1 minute appearance, and then just before that camp, he played like 20-something minutes. He's played 11 out of the last 12 games. 7 of the last 8 have been 90 minutes. So for me, he's a different profile now than he was in September camp, right? Because he's got he's in the lineup every day now, where he wasn't. So, the one thing I'm going to trust Mauricio Pochettino with for sure is center backs, right? If Mauricio Pochettino says this guy's a good center back, then I'm going to trust him he's a good center back because he knows that position better than any. So that's the only reason. I just always think like there's always one surprise somewhere along the way. And he's the one I'm going to see. I like where he's going right now. He might not play at all in the World Cup, but he would be my one surprise in there that I think people will follow, if not at this World Cup, certainly moving forward. Tab always mentions, and we've had this discussion forever, like 10-year goalkeepers and 10-year center backs. Noah Kai Banks is 19 years old playing in the Bundesliga every single week now as a center back. Chris Richards is becoming that guy. It's been 3 years now. He's 25 years old. Like, you can see Chris Richards playing in 3 World Cups, right? Yep. I mean, we're finding 10-year center backs right now in our program.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tony. I remember as we brought all the guys through the youth national teams that we always said to them in all the private meetings, look, we know you're a good player. That's why you're here. And obviously we think that you're going to be on the national team. But we're not just looking for players who are going to be in the national team for a couple games. We're looking for the players who are going to be 10-year national team players. And you're right. Now we have a couple guys on this team that potentially are going to be those guys, and I think that's really nice to see.
I would agree. And there's a lot a lot of soccer to be played. Just really quickly on Banks, I wanted to say he played, I think, like 250 minutes at the end of the last European season. Tony, your point still remains. He was very, very green in first-team professional football. And at that point, it was a surprise, a pleasant surprise when he was on the roster. But, yeah, that is definitely when you talk about somebody comes out of nowhere. When I've been asked that question, I've been making educated guesses of, usually it's a center forward. But honestly, the more you think about it, no, Kai Banks might be the guy. But that's all the time we have for this episode. Tony Meola, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
you guys listen to Tony on CBS Sports Golazo on SiriusXM. Anytime he's speaking, you should be listening. Tony, you're a legend. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you all for listening.
Yeah,
Tab,
thanks,
thank you.
guys.
Thanks, everybody inside American Soccer. Please rate, review, and subscribe. And submit your questions for me and Tab. We are going to do a mailbag. I'm going to put it out on social media as well as a nice reminder. And we're going to take questions. We want to talk about what you want us to talk about. So please give us your questions, and we'll answer them in an upcoming episode very soon. Thank you all very much.